Welcome to this explainer. Grab your controllers and hit start, because today we're embarking on a massive, nostalgia-fueled quest. Our mission? We're going to uncover exactly why some classic video games still feel incredibly, undeniably playable today, while others are, well, best left in the blurry haze of our childhood memories.
I mean, it really begs the question, what makes a game immortal? Why does some heavily hyped titles just become clunky historical curiosities a few years later, while others manage to defeat time entirely? Is it the art direction, the core mechanics, or maybe something magical hidden deep in the code? Okay, let's dive into this and count down the top 10 games that have aged surprisingly well, looking at the pure design philosophies that keep them alive.
Kicking off our retro leaderboard at number 10, we've got a game that literally changed the landscape of PC gaming forever, ripping and tearing its way into history. That's right, we're talking about Doom. Released in 1993 by the absolute legends at id Software, this title completely revolutionized first-person shooters. Now, you might think a 3D game from the early 90s would feel terribly clunky today, and honestly, a lot of them absolutely do. But Doom, it remains endlessly replayable. And the reason is super simple. Fast gameplay never goes out of style. Because the original engine was technically 2D masquerading as 3D, it allowed for that frictionless, lightning-fast strafe running that modern physics-heavy shooters still struggle to replicate. Combine that blistering speed with brilliantly simple maze-like levels and unbelievably satisfying shotgun combat, and it still feels fantastic. Plus, an incredibly thriving modding community means there is literally always a new, chaotic way to experience this classic. Let's move to and see how this builds into our number 9 spot, featuring a title that didn't just define a genre, it practically wrote the holy text for it. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, released by Nintendo back in 1991. What keeps this Super Nintendo masterpiece feeling remarkably modern is its absolutely flawless execution of the basics. We're talking about incredibly clever dungeon design, deeply rewarding exploration, and a perfectly tuned difficulty curve. But the real magic is that nearly every single mechanic, from the brilliant execution of the light and dark world duality to the immensely satisfying hookshot physics, remains completely relevant in modern game design today. It established a structural blueprint for progression and pacing that developers are still using as a benchmark over 30 years later. How crazy is that? Keeping the pace brisk, we're jumping forward to 1995 for our number 8 spot to look at arguably the greatest RPG ever constructed. Chrono Trigger, developed by a literal dream team of creators at Square. Now, if you know RPGs from the 16-bit era, you know they're notoriously packed with excessive grinding, random enemy encounters, and hours of unnecessary filler. But Chrono Trigger actively avoids all of that. It still impresses today with gorgeous sprite animation, brilliant time travel mechanics, and multiple endings. But the real secret to its mortality? Its exceptional pacing. By completely ditching random encounters and executing its active time battle system directly on the exploration map, it keeps every single hour engaging. It respects your time in a way that feels incredibly modern and fluid. For number 7, we're leveling up to the year 2004 to explore a title that completely redefined how stories are told in a 3D space, raising the bar for an entire industry. Half-Life 2 by Valve, and this brilliantly illustrates how a game can still feel remarkably polished nearly 2 decades later. Instead of forcing you to drop your controller and watch lengthy passive cutscenes, the narrative here unfolds entirely naturally around you. You are always in control of Gordon Freeman. Combine that seamless environmental storytelling with the iconic gravity gun, a physics engine that still feels wonderfully weighty and satisfying, and a level design philosophy that constantly introduces fresh ideas before quickly moving on to the next. It's an absolute masterclass in keeping you completely engaged without ever breaking immersion. Dropping all the way back to 1984 for number 6. We've got a game whose mechanics are so universally understandable, it requires absolutely zero technological horsepower to hook you. It is, of course, the undisputed king of puzzle games, Tetris. Created by Alexei Pajitnov during the Cold War, this is the ultimate proof that you do not need photorealistic graphics or advanced tech to create a masterpiece. It proves you literally only need 7 perfect geometric shapes to hack the human brain. The deceptively simple mechanics of rotating blocks and clearing lines create absolutely endless strategic possibilities. The way it slowly ramps up the speed induces a flow state so powerful, it actually birthed the psychological term the Tetris effect. It's pure, timeless gameplay that effortlessly transcends generations. We're officially entering the top half of our countdown with number 5. This is the title that essentially birthed an entire modern subgenre of exploration games. Super Metroid, a 1994 masterclass in atmosphere by Nintendo. When you hear folks talk about modern Metroidvania games, well, they owe an enormous, towering debt to this specific descent into Planet Zebes. It holds up beautifully because its moody, isolating world implicitly encourages what we now call sequence breaking. It actually rewards you for being clever enough to bypass intended routes and discover secrets out of order. The interconnected map, the subtle visual storytelling, and the highly satisfying progression of upgrading your suit still rival and honestly often beat many current releases today. Jumping forward to 2007 for our number 4 spot, we have a beautifully concise, bite-sized experience that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that a game absolutely doesn't need to be long to be legendary. So, the crucial point perfectly illustrates an undeniable truth. Smart design beats flashy graphics. We're talking about Valve's Portal. With its sterile, minimalist visual aesthetic, Portal manages to feel completely ageless. The momentum-based puzzle design is just entirely ingenious. Every single test chamber teaches you a new concept about spatial awareness without ever holding your hand or feeling repetitive. Throw in some truly unforgettable, darkly comedic writing from an AI named GLaDOS and, a very deceptive cake, and you've got a game that respects your time, never overstays its welcome, and relies entirely on its brilliant core mechanics to stay relevant. Stepping onto the podium now at number 3 with a 1990 classic that represents the absolute gold standard of platforming evolution, Super Mario World. Platformers have evolved tremendously over the decades, right? Transitioning into massive 3D collectathons and beyond. Yet this 16-bit Nintendo classic remains one of the smoothest, most joyous experiences ever coded. Why? Because of nearly flawless gameplay mechanics. The delightfully tight controls, especially the momentum-based physics of mastering the Cape Feather, feel incredibly precise. Combine that perfect weight with the endlessly imaginative design of Dinosaur Land, the countless hidden Star Road secrets mapped across the world, and those vibrant visuals, and it ensures the game remains every single bit as fun to play today as it was in 1990. Revealing our runner-up at number 2, we've got a massive, sprawling fantasy epic from 2011 that simply refuses to fade from the gaming landscape, no matter how many times it gets re-released. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim from Bethesda Game Studios. More than a decade after its initial release, this game is somehow still attracting waves of new players. Its massive open world, the radiant AI that creates completely unexpected emergent gameplay, and the unparalleled freedom of choice it hands you are legendary. But beyond the memorable quests, it's the monumental modding community, a community that can do literally everything from overhauling the graphics to turning terrifying dragons into Thomas the Tank Engine that has allowed it to seamlessly cross multiple console generations. Player freedom and endless replayability are the ultimate preservatives in gaming, and Skyrim proves it perfectly. Now, before we reveal the ultimate timeless classic, we gotta fire through some incredible honorable mentions. These are absolute heavy hitters that just narrowly missed our top 10. Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, Resident Evil 4, Age of Empires 2, StarCraft, Minecraft, Diablo 2, Metal Gear Solid, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, Civilization 4, and Banjo-Kazooie. Wow, every single one of these defining titles remains just as capable of capturing our imaginations and stealing our weekends today as they did on release day. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the core truth that emerges when we look at all these games. Cutting-edge graphics inevitably age. Technology naturally marches on, and what looked incredibly photorealistic yesterday just looks jagged and blocky today. But great controls, smart level design, brilliantly balanced mechanics, and engaging gameplay loops, those are the elements that allow a title to completely outlive the plastic and silicon hardware it was originally built for. Design is permanent, tech is temporary. And that brings us to the ultimate drumroll. The number 1 timeless classic that manages to flawlessly defeat the final boss of aging. Super Mario Bros. 3, released in 1988. It is just staggering to realize that very, very few games from the 1980s still feel this incredibly polished and inventive. The sheer density of ideas packed into an NES cartridge is mind-boggling. Every single level introduces fresh, unique mechanics, from the hilariously fun Krabos shoe to the swimming mechanics of the frog suit, before tossing them away just as quickly to give you something new. Framed beautifully around a charming stage play aesthetic, the controls remain wonderfully, perfectly responsive. Even after nearly 4 decades, it doesn't just hold up for nostalgia's sake. It stands firmly, actively, among the greatest platformers ever created. It's the absolute masterclass in timeless game design. So, I leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder. Which game releasing today will actually outlive its hardware? When the flashy ray tracing and massive 4K textures are considered horribly outdated 20 years from now,
Which current releases are relying on that pure, smart, timeless design to keep players coming back? Look at modern gaming through this lens, and you might just spot tomorrow's immortal classics today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep playing the greats.